Hello, welcome to the Sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Open in Cincinnati, part of the SCG Tour. I am Nick Miller alongside Scott Kirkwood. How you doing, sir?
Pretty well. How are you?
Pretty good. I just saw you win your last round of day one, so you're 8-1, and you cast Flame Jab and Terastodon in the same match.
Yes, I did.
So that was enough to get me interested in what you're playing here. But you're playing Ascendancy Gifts.
Yes.
So Jeskai Ascendancy came out on the scene and people started jamming this deck in Vintage, Legacy, Modern, and then of course we've seen Gifts be around for a while as well.
Yep.
You have combined the two.
Yes. It was kind of like I had played them independently, and then we'll get to like the Gifts packages, but I realized there was a certain Gifts package you could make that made Jeskai Ascendancy very good, and so that's kind of what the deck was based off of.
All right, so we have the Jeskai Ascendancy engine, which you get fueled by cards like Serum Vision and Faithless Looting, as well as Is a Charm, and then you have a bunch of kind of removal to stay alive, Path to Exile, Lightning Bolt. Then you have the combo, which kind of take us through the normal Ascendancy combo, which we've seen with Sylvan Caryatid and now Thornwood Falls, but then we'll go into the other packages this deck has as well.
Lumbering Falls. So basically when you have a Mana Dork and Jeskai Ascendancy, you can play a spell, like for instance a draw spell, so say Serum Visions. You get to loot and untap the Dork and give it +1/+1, and then draw your card. So that essentially if you theoretically just had every card you drew was a draw card, you could just make your guy incredibly big and kill them with it. And that's traditionally what the old ones did with the Treasure Cruise and the Dig Through Time version that I had played.
Using Fate Stitcher as well.
Oh yeah, and Fate Stitcher as well. Birds, Sylvan Caryatid, Fate Stitcher. Some versions played Noble Hierarch, stuff like that. And yeah, that's really it. You just keep going, and the loot really helps increase your card quality, so that of course you don't always draw the draw spells, but hopefully that loot will let you get rid of the lands you draw or the trash cards and keep going.
Right. So that's kind of route one or A of all the routes you can go with this deck. Take us through the two Gifts routes that are really interesting here.
All right, so Gifts really allows you to just search for an pseudo-infinite combo within the deck. That comprises of fetching Simic Growth Chamber, Flame Jab, Life from the Loam, and Fate Stitcher.
Yeah, we've seen Simic Growth Chamber in another combo deck, but it's weird to see it in this kind of format or this kind of deck where you're not really abusing the bounce land capability.
Yeah, I mean it is occasionally nice. You get some value off it, but really it's there just so when you're doing the combo, you can tap Fate Stitcher and untap Simic Growth Chamber to get 2 mana off of a single Mana Dork activation, essentially.
So take us through the Loam, Flame Jab, Growth Chamber interaction here.
Okay, so basically the way I'll do it to opponents who haven't seen it before is I'm going to propose a loop, and the loop is that say I have 2 or more land cards in my graveyard, and at least 2 mana's worth of Dorks in play, meaning either the Fate Stitcher plus Simic Growth Chamber, or a bird and a Sylvan Caryatid, something of that nature. I'll tap my Dorks and play a Life from the Loam. This will untap the Dorks, I'll then return the 2 lands to my hand. If there's a Flame Jab in the yard, you can cast Flame Jab from the yard, retracing, and that will allow you to loot. Off the loot, you dredge the Life from the Loam back into your hand, and then discard the excess land. And then you're back where you started. You have a Life from the Loam in your hand and 2 or more land cards in your graveyard. And then you just keep doing that until you get creatures big enough, and it allows you to occasionally win on your second main phase as well. So what you can do is tap down their blue source with a Fate Stitcher and cast a few cantrips. I'll then go off with your Life from the Loam, Flame Jab, deal damage directly to their face.
All right. So I saw you against Abzan just use Flame Jab to take down a bunch of creatures, retrace, bring it back to kill a Siege Rhino, take down some creatures, and then just kind of win via damage with that. And then also Iona, which is part of the Gifts package when you want to go with a fatty.
Yeah, so Flame Jab does occasionally, that was one of the rare moments. I think that's the 3rd time I've ever actually, started Flame Jabbing because it was just so grindy. But yeah, the other side of the Gifts combo is the stereotypical Gifts package you've seen, which is just simply gift states that you can search for up to 4 cards. So because of that, you can search for Umbera Rites and a fatty, which in the main board is Iona and Elesh Norn, and in the sideboard is Terastodon and sometimes Sigarda. And so these are just bullets against decks that will just die to them. Elesh Norn, for instance, just destroys Affinity. I played 2 Affinities today and was very happy with it because it's just basically an instant win. Iona, red most of the time versus burn, stuff of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, those cards, like those combination of cards, the two routes you can go can kind of take down the grindy slow decks or shut down the super fast decks via, you know, Ellis Norn or something like that, taking down Affinity or Infect and smaller decks like that.
Exactly.
Right. You also have another couple of cards floating around in here. You got a Sphinx's Revelation and Snapcaster Mage, just for value, I assume?
Yeah, Snapcaster, originally, like in the original iteration of the deck, I had Snapcaster Noxious Revival, which puts a third gifts package into play, which is you can gifts for like Jeskai Ascendancy, Snapcaster Mage, and Noxious Revival, and whatever they do, they have to give you the Ascendancy.
Right.
But what I found is that overall, you don't really need that Noxious Revival. Like, I've tried in multiple gift decks, and I think if you're playing Noxious Revival in your gift deck, you just need to cut the Revival because it's not worth it. It's card disadvantage and pretty bad. But Snapcaster Mage, I think we all know is a very good card, and so it allows some flexibility with the gifts packages to be able to flashback key spells, such as Path to Exile, Lightning Bolt, or kind of serve as an extra gifts ungiven in the grindy matchups. Just generally all-purpose all-star.
So how would you break down your wins today? What was the most common route and kind of what was the most rare route to victory?
I would say like 40%, I would say like maybe like it was pretty evenly split by like thirds, basically. A third of the time I comboed. I did that versus, you know, Boggles and a few grindy matches, managed to do it versus Junk. A third of the time was just, you know, slam the Ellis Norn versus Affinity, 2 matches with that, slam the Iona versus Burn, 1 match with that. And then the other third is the grindy route, where especially in the sideboard, where we'll kind of get to those cards, where you just kind of board out like a lot of your like low drops like birds and just try and, you know, go the long game with the Flame Jab and the card advantage engines and stuff like that.
So we'll move on to the sideboard. Of course, we got to mention Terastodon, everyone's favorite cube, you know, all-star here, with along with EDH, and then Sigarda, kind of like your other big go-to creatures.
Yes.
And what are those matchups for?
Terastodon is typically a bullet just for Tron, but it is also, well, at least that's the idea behind it, and when you see in most gift decks, that's what it's for. But this deck really has a huge Liliana problem.
Okay.
If they had like a resolved Liliana, fetching your Iona, for instance, they're just going to make you sack it, and you're going to be really sad. So Terastodon allows you to Unbureau Write something that can either mana screw them, kill their Liliana, or just put 18 power into play from your lands and allow you to kill them really fast. So it comes also in for Junk and Jund, and occasionally like really grindy decks like I boarded in versus Grixis Control earlier. Oh, and Sigarda, again, is just really hard to kill.
Yeah.
And so when in those grindy matches, if you resolve Sigarda, you're just going to hit them for 5 over the turns that are, they can't really do anything about it.
Nothing they can really do about it. Obstinate Baloth gains you some life, but also kind of tricky with the discard spells.
Yeah.
Or Liliana in particular.
I've never put it into play off Liliana so far. I really want to. That slot's been really up in the air. It used to be a Rest for the Weary. It was a Thragtusk until my friend was like, I don't have Thragtusk, you want Baloth? I'm like, that actually seems better, so yes. It's just essentially a slot that can come in versus Burn, but is also good in the grindy matchup. So it's like it's kind of multi-purpose instead of just only coming in for Burn.
Got a couple of counter spells, Dispel and Negate. What are you bringing those in, just control matchups, or are you worried about combo?
Combo, yeah, of course. You know, the Grishol brand, Amulet Bloom, stuff of that nature. One of the big ones that the reason I'm running 2 Negate, 1 Dispel is for Tron. Karn is the big issue, so if you like can negate the Karn, that's pretty useful. And I just felt generally if you get into those grindy things, Negate is a little bit better, I think. So.
Got a couple of Leyline of Sanctities to help protect against discard and things like that. And then Engineered Explosives, Celestial Purge, and Ghost Quarter. Are those targets for gifts, or are those very specific where you want those?
As a side note, the Leyline also very good versus Burn, so make sure you board those in. But Ghost Quarter is versus, again, Tron. Since you play Life from the Loam and gifts, you can gifts for like, you know, Life from the Loam, Ghost Quarter, and theoretically, if they don't have the Tron online yet, and they don't have a Relic, you can just lock them out of the game. It's also very good versus Manland. So, for instance, if you're playing again versus Grixis Control against Jund, against Junk, you can just continually kill their landlands, and it's kind of against Affinity as well. It's very useful in a lot of matchups. Engineered Explosives was just the best of the Wrath effects. There's like the option of Pyroclasm, Radiant Flames, Anger, but like it's really hard to play those in this deck since typically in those matchups you want to keep in your low mana creatures, so you don't want to be killing them. And Engineered Explosives, sometimes it's awkward, but it's just so good that, and the ability, like I killed an Elspeth with it earlier, put it on 4, and it was like, we got to do it. But just that flexibility is really good. Yeah. And Celestial Purge is something to bring in versus Twin that also kills Blood Moon. and is of course good versus Liliana and like Jund and Junk as well.
All right. Well, you seem to know the deck very well. You know the ins and outs. You've proven it after going 8-1, on day one. So, looks good. Thanks for joining me here in the sideboard. Hope you have, pretty good luck tomorrow. We'd like to see this deck in the top 8 for sure.
I mean, I'd like to see it too, and thank you for having me.
All right, not a problem. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com for all the coverage here in Cincinnati.